Okay.
So, welcome to my very special Changemakers interview. This time, I have such a beautiful woman with me that inspires me every single time I have a conversation with her. And not only does she inspire me, she always gives me insights that I think afterwards, oh my God, that was so profoundly deep. I'm talking about Gina Lazenby. Yes, the one and only. Uh, the woman who handed me a book. Once upon a time, she handed me a book. It was her own book, book about Feng Shui. She looked at it and said, Runa, is this a language that you understand? And I looked at the book and I said, oh, that's in Danish, Gina. And said, oh, fine. Can you read it? Yes, I do. Here it is. And that shows that this woman, her books have been translated into so many languages, she doesn't even know. and I just thought, this book is one of my favorite books. I go in and I look at that when I need to arrange my things around. But Feng Shui is not only her thing. Her thing is really about, basically, I would say wellness, Gina, if I think about it. It's about how can we create a world where people can feel good about themselves and in every aspect of their lives. And yeah, that's really what that comes up to me when I'm thinking about you, because your wisdom is so profoundly deep on that level. And so I'm super excited to have you with me on this special call today. So welcome, Gina Lazenby from the UK.
Thank you. Wonderful, Runa.
and one of the things that we have frequently been talking about, and throughout the years, and I would really like us to dig into on this call, it's about the world seems to be changing, and there are so many people that are coming up to me. And I think they're coming up to you as well and said, there's something going on. And I'm just not sure what it is. It seems like we're going through a big shift. I don't know if I'm part of that shift or how I'm going to be part of it or what's really going to happen and what's going to come out of that shift. And so there's a lot of turmoil going on in the world. And I think that has there are ways that we can either be on that wave and be with the flow, but we need to know, I think, as individuals, of where am I going with this and why should I go into that flow.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's changing, but I think also apart from the change, it's changing very fast. And I think change is the norm. It always has been, really.
Yeah.
Look back, everything's different. But I think the change is big, it's fast, and we need to keep up. So rather than learning things, we need to learn how to cope with change. That's I think, an important skill, to be resilient so that we can, live a sustainable life. And I don't just mean in terms of ecology and finance. We can cope. We have coping skills for the change. I think actually something happened in the last couple of days that demonstrates our perhaps lack of ability to cope. You and I have talked about issues about feminism and about women's rights and the change and gender issues, and both of us very much in a way that's positive to men as opposed to blaming men. We may blame patriarchy or systems that are highly masculine, but I think you and I both vocalize that men and women are disadvantaged by that. It's not just women, but of course disadvantaged. And we have a backlash. Well, we have an issue at the moment, which is sexual harassment, particularly in women's careers, and particularly as it came out in Hollywood, is on the table as a big news story. Harvey Weinstein. And so looking at that, there's an element of, in the early days of news like that, you think, as people just getting on the bandwagon, or do they have real stories? And I don't say that to diss the importance of this. My worry and concern was that we don't have the skills to deal with it. And the reason that people, there's the act of whatever happened, and then there's what happened after the action, how it was dealt with, and that seems to be a big issue. If you took it to your boss, if you took it to the management, the managing director, and they didn't do anything, or you took it to the prime minister and they didn't do anything, then they are to blame. Well, we lived in a culture where, what the heck did you do? And you then become part of the problem when you know, best not to know. And, the number of times I have women say to me, and they took it to their boss, and their boss said their boss's boss, and the boss said, but he's such a nice man. He's got a family. I can't possibly see that would be the case, therefore I don't believe you. I mean, that's just traditional. So now it's coming out from everywhere. So now there's a massive listening, which is great.
Yeah.
But then what do you do with the listening? And now suddenly we blame. So we really need to look at the culture. And I'm thinking, if I was, and I think something came up about somebody did something to someone when they were drunk and they didn't remember. And I thought, jeepers creepers.
Yeah.
If somebody came at me 30 years or 20 years later and said, you did this when you were drunk. Not in your right mind. He who is without sin cast the first stone, really. But then we find out that the act was something that was unpleasant. So there's a line somewhere of what is like, come on, is that really something you should report 20 years later? And yes, my goodness me, that is awful. Where is that line? So yes, we need to discuss it. It's kind of discussed in open debate on the radio and in headlines. And the media, I don't think, are very good curators of conversations. They're sensationalists, they headline. And I was thinking, who's going to be a casualty in this? And we've had one this week. A minister in the Welsh Parliament was sacked last week by the First Minister of Wales because allegations had been made and they have to find out about them. So he's then sacked, and we don't know what the allegations are. I haven't tracked the news story from the beginning, but on Tuesday or whatever, a few days later, the man kills himself. It does not mean he's guilty. And I think one of the issues was that the solicitor wrote and said, what are the allegations and charges? And said, well, we can't tell you, we don't know, or whatever. So it wasn't that he'd done X and tried to say, I didn't do X. He said, what have I done? So the First Minister, the news, what's he going to say? Is he going to keep his job? How did he handle it? So his response was, just follow the rules. I did it by the book. That's how I did the termination. And so a comment on the radio this morning from her colleague who shared a parliamentary office with him was, well, I think we need a new book.
Exactly.
We need new rules.
Yeah.
You can't bring to a delicate situation that you don't face every week. What we see now is situations that people have avoided, men and women. And now they're out. Whoa, how do we deal with it? And blame. We have to say, right, this is a great opportunity to bring this out in the open. Let's draw a line. Unless it's really bad, let's just not have blame. Hand on knee. Maybe that's okay. You don't have to lose your job. Beyond that, yes, you do. You can work out rules for discussion, because we have to find answers together. It's not a case of women blaming all the men. You can't do that. And there are women who've been hurt, they get angry and they take it out on a man, on men. And we need to look at how we handle this. And I think compassion is really key. So when you have this unusual situation, you have to bring deep compassion to it, because you have to take care of the person until it's proven that they are a perpetrator and at fault, and need to be treated as well. We're looking at criminalizing this and treating people as criminals. In the early stages, when we have doubt and we say, well, I want to remove you while we have doubt, remove you from your political office, we have to deal with it with compassion, and we're not bringing that. And that is something that we need at all levels of society. It just came up as an issue for me this morning when I heard the discussion about I did it by the book. I followed the rules.
By the book, and I think that's really.
You're saying that new paradigm.
The new paradigm is the new book, and really, what you're saying is, we need to write the new book, and to write the new book, we need conversations.
We do need conversations. And I think what is difficult is having difficult conversations. I don't like having difficult conversations. I'm not trained in them, or at least I wasn't brought up. Our family didn't sit down and easily have difficult conversations. So I don't have deep practice. Of course, you can learn in later life, and of course, I have learnt to do that, because I would come to a conversation with, you know, in my inner space would be calm. If I come to angry, then there's all sorts of presumptions and I'm not going to have a good dialogue. So I've learned to take care of how I feel, and I've learned to be listening. If I listen out for what's their perspective, it's not that I'm right and how can I get them to see that my right and I understand how wrong they are. And so I really feel that these conversations at all levels help us as the micro expands out into the macro at every level. Let's start in school, but catching up, let's all of us have a place to talk. And an example of that is Conscious Cafe, which is a movement that Judy Piatkis, a publisher, started in London. She wanted to meet peer group and have meaningful conversations about life. And people who were equally interested in growing and having those conversations. And so I used to go down to London to those meetings, and now I've set up a kind of a little satellite group in Skipton, because the value I see in them is it's a practice of different people sitting in a room talking about a subject, and we don't listen to a speaker tell us about the subject. We may start off with that. We may seed some content into the group, then we split up and we talk. And then what the people have said to me in the conversations that I've hosted, and I've hosted not Conscious Cafe, but many conversations over the years, is that, I love running circles, and in a circle, we all get to speak. I think that's the issue. I think where you have transfer information, which is expert on the stage, group in the audience, give you my information, and then, okay, any questions? And then people expose themselves by asking a question. You don't really get deeper understanding. And if something comes up, excuse me, it's not necessarily a safe space to bring it up. And we need that safe space we need to create a safe space. And things like Conscious Cafe and circles and women's gatherings I've hosted are safe spaces for us to say something, and so we can say it and somebody else to say, I hear you. I may not agree with you, and it's interesting. I want to hear more because my opinion is different, or I resonate with that. It's, same thing happened to me. I feel in accord, and then we leave that gathering and we go, I am not alone. Other people feel as bad as I do, as good as I do, that they're as hopeful as I am, they're as fearful as I am, they've had the same experience. So I feel recognized. Yeah. And that's the value of anything that brings people together in a well-facilitated, compassionate listening circle, so that we get to practice having conversations and sit and listen and think, interesting what my reaction would be. Just get a practice of talking so that when something big comes out, something difficult, you've got a little bit of practice, or you've even got a group to go to discuss it with. Exactly. Yeah. As you do. Yeah. So I've got this problem. And then everybody debates it, and then you come away reinforced and empowered to have the difficult conversation, the difficult confrontation, or whatever challenge it is. You have a resource to grow on, in a way that we might have had a grandparent that we might have gone to, but we have to build those resources around us so that we can build up our competencies for being a bit wiser, for listening, for having more compassion, and not being either vote left or right. I mean, one side of a line or a spectrum, know? Yeah. In the middle, those 50 shades of grey in between black and white. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Of whatever, 50 shades of something, where are we on that? Yeah. And we might have the ability to move if we hear some new information. Yeah, and I think you're so spot on. I think it's most common that people have not been brought up with really being able to learn how to do those difficult conversations and having those difficult conversations. And it is really it is about bold leadership when it comes to the leaders in this world. And then I'm talking about, personally, I believe every one of us is a leader in our own life. Now I'm talking about people who are in positions that they are leading a project, a company, an organization, or a business, whatever they are leading forward. But in their environment, being able to create those type of conscious cafes like you're talking about, I can envision that to be a space where people feel even better about their workplace as well. Well, I trained in listening circles in a leadership program, and it was one of the most amazing things that I did. Yeah. the term African lahotla is a gathering place, and it's a circle where you would speak. But the person that facilitates the circle isn't necessarily the most senior. It's interesting when you do that.
Yeah.
Because if you go in as the boss and you go, okay, we're in a circle, and you direct everybody, people don't necessarily feel equal and feel they can speak. But if you have practice being in a circle and have somebody whose turn it is to facilitate, and the boss or the most senior people or the different hierarchy, we're all sitting in a circle and we've got agreed terms of what's appropriate. One person speaks at a time. We're speaking about one subject. We share what we feel when it comes around to our turn. But we create these safe spaces where we can speak. Then firstly, everybody gets to speak, which is in itself. I mean, I would say the whole Brexit vote in Britain is, listen to my voice. You know, you haven't heard me, and I'm going to use my voice and vote against something. I'm not saying everybody did that, but it is when you put out a vote and you get a backlash, you get what you feel like a surprising result of people giving it to you. It's because they haven't had a way of speaking. So, you know, at every level, if we can incorporate ways for people to say how they feel in a safe place, and get used to doing that, and people listen, and then just builds up muscles in the brain, as it were, the neural pathways for listening, being open, and understanding the other, and doing it in the context of a group rather than just one-to-one. You know, in your work environment, in your church, your community, you know, whatever. But I also, you know, I say church and community, but work, where we take away the hierarchy for that meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's essential for it to work.
So you feel you can say something rather than at the last minute say, look, I've got to say, or go out to the ladies' toilets and say it, you know, a place to say it. And you know, you talked about bold leadership, and I would say that our old interpretation of the word bold is like a masculine word to do with courage and being bold and out there and taking action. I'm not saying that is, but that's a interpretation of the word. But bold is also being compassionate, you know, having the courage to bring compassion. So we do need bold leadership, but the bold leadership that is willing to be vulnerable, open, listening, compassionate. It's a different kind of leadership.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. And I think here's what I think is really coming. What you're just saying now, Gina, and again, you always give me some new insights. So looking at that, I want to go from, yes, this is what we need. I totally agree with you. And now I want to go into, so how can people, you know, Mr. Smith and Miss Jones or whatever, whoever is out there, how can they start? I mean, where do people start the process? Going back to what I started talking about in the beginning, people are, they feel there's so much happening. How can I start the conscious cafe? Or how can I start this conversation, this circle of dialogue? Whom do I need to bring into this table so that this can be successful, and we can have that conversation of what type of a world do we want to live in? Well,
it's a good question. And, you know, I think one of the places to start is stop reading newspapers.
Okay, step one, stop reading newspapers.
Yeah, and I say that because if you read papers and newspapers and some TV, you're taking information through a filter. And so you need to understand the filter. So perhaps read the right newspapers. Who is saying this to me that is consciously and unconsciously programming me, getting me excited, giving me a headline, think that's terrible. And so I react. So, yeah, you have to look at where you get your information from and maybe change that source of information to get it as pure to the source as possible rather than through an opinion. And an opinion, and even if you agree with the opinion, you know, we've got to look at, is it fair, is it balanced? What am I taking in and how am I reacting? And so therefore have opinions about other people. Curiosity. How do I find out about other people? I mean, you know, if I see events like there was one local a while ago about Muslim women wearing the hijab, and it was a question about that. But now that I'm interested in, because I've never sat down with a Muslim woman to say, why do you wear the hijab or why don't you? I just haven't had that conversation. I thought this is going to be interesting. So I go, and then I meet other people who are equally interested in the conversation. What that meeting didn't do was allow us to have more of an inquiry and discussion. We should have gone into little circles, had a dialogue, because you end up going home with a load of questions.
Yeah.
Unanswered and resolved.
You need to empty out. Basically, you need to
to say what they didn't talk about, what I would have liked, and to do that in the context of the meeting is good, and then to feed it back. It means when you're leading something or making an offering, you might get negative feedback, but it is not negative feedback. It is, and it's not criticism. It is input, and it might hurt. It might be, I wasn't expecting that, but that's what they asked for. That is interesting. Okay, where did what could I do next time? What could I do to support people? So, I think get involved, be open, look at, read, but look at where you're reading, who's giving you that information, read more than one source. Yeah. And I love the idea of Conscious Cafe here in my hometown and having dialogue with people who are different. They're not necessarily people I would seek out as friends, and very nice people. But we're getting a really interesting conversation. That's what the feedback is. They like being in the group talking about whatever. We've had interesting subjects.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you talked about the importance to have someone who can facilitate that, who can basically facilitate it in the way that everyone can speak. And I think with so many really good and well-trained coaches in the world, they are perfect people they know how to allow everyone to speak. So I think in every organization or company, or there is someone who has that ability, has been trained as a coach or has some coaching training, and so I think you just need to open up and say, okay, who's a good person to facilitate, and what are the questions that we want to talk about, and what is that we want to take away from that talk. So I think, in Iceland after the cross in 2009, we had that National Assembly, 1,500 people from all over the island coming together. And I was just thinking about when you said that, we had on the same table, there were ministers, they were the CEOs, and there was the cleaning lady at the same time. It was all there. So,
that's real democracy, isn't it?
That was a real democracy. And I remember, as I was leading 9 tables at the time with 9 facilitators, it was very clear. No one, when they introduced themselves, would say, hey, my name is such and such, and I'm the minister of such and such. They would just say first name and the town that they came from.
Great. That is. I've been on holidays actually in maybe it's a spiritual holiday where we arrived there. First names, we knew nothing about each other. And at the end of it, find somebody's an airline pilot. If they say, "Hi, I'm Roger. I'm an airline pilot," and somebody else says, "I'm teaching in a nursery school or whatever," you start your own thoughts about what you think people are. But talking about the dialogue, I had a meeting recently with a spiritual organization where we are facilitating women who've been recognized as achieving various things in life and in community through their spiritual power. And we're looking at helping a generation of young women in the early 20s. So we had a meeting and we invited a young woman, and what was interesting about her was her need. So she traveled all the way to London to attend this meeting, and she didn't really know what it was about, but her mentor, somebody who hosted a meditation circle and training that had, I suppose, taken her under her wing and befriended her, like 40 years difference in age, had said, go along to this meeting. So she came with curiosity, and we said, wonderful, you're here. Tell us about the needs of young women. And, she so craved this conversation. And we learn, what we really recognize is we learn from each other. It's not the older telling the young people how to do it all. And you can't do that now, as we just agreed. Paradigm is shifting. We don't know all the answers. And what she said was, she came from Ghana when she was 13, and she grew up on a compound with her aunties and her grandparents and grandmothers, and she didn't have that now, and she was living in a town not with her mother over here, so she missed what she'd had, which is access to those kind of comforting conversations. And she was sustained now by a women's circle that she joined, and meditation community that she'd gone to, and she said one of the women in the women's circle had recognized her and saw strength in her and fed it back to her, and she said, nobody has ever said anything to me or seen me. This is a woman who's been to university and has left and has no idea what to do and is struggling, and they don't give them any, they weren't really giving them advice and support when they left. It's like, you're an adult now, you got your degree, off you go.
Yeah.
And she got it from these circles. And so the women's gathering and the meditation group, if that doesn't float your boat, there's all sorts of ways of getting together with people and having dialogue. I have a once a year Christmas drinks for the people on my street.
Oh, wow.
And invite all the neighbours in, those that want to come.
Yeah.
I've done some renovations, so I want to thank them for their patience. But, nobody else has offered. I don't mind doing it. And it gets us in a room and chatting. We chat over the bed.
Yeah, and you talk. Yeah.
Find out more about people if you're willing to listen and provide space for people to get together.
That is brilliant. I think that is brilliant. And so it really starts with ourselves. It starts by saying, hey, it's Christmas party at my place. Come over and let's talk. I mean, that's really where it starts, doesn't it? Yeah. And it starts by being human and allowing other people to be human as well.
It's a simple, it is. And at the human level, it's a simple welcome. Come into my house.
Come into my house. I think that's beautiful.
Yourself,
I'm gonna use those words as the ending of this conversation. I know that I need to talk to you again sooner than later because I need your wisdom, Gina Lazenby. Thank you so much for showing us once again that we can do things, each and every one of us, as an individual, just by starting, like you said, just starting with a little Christmas party.
Yeah, well, bless you. Yeah, well, bless you.
Less bless from me in Iceland.